Hello, guys, and welcome back to the Healthy Not Complicated podcast. I do have a special guest here behind me. Oh, I'm sure he will be back. But thank you for tuning in today. The topic we are going to be going over in today's episode is salt and sodium, whether it's something you should be limiting or not. We're going to go over all of the evidence for and against salt consumption. We're going to talk about if it raises blood pressure, who needs more salt in their diet, who might need less. We'll cover it all today because there really is a lot of misinformation out there when it comes to salt and sodium. I'm sure we've all been told a million times that consuming too much salt increases our blood pressure, and that's bad. That's not something that we want. But is there more to the story? Because honestly, a lot of the advice we get surrounding salt is completely outdated and not supported by the latest research. It's really important for muscle function, brain function, nerve function. There's a reason why when you're dehydrated, you get muscle cramps. It's because that dehydration isn't just a loss of water, it's a loss of sodium. So clearly sodium has some role in the body. And just like we once demonized things like fat and the cholesterol in eggs, I think it's time for salt to have a bit of a rebrand. Let's start by talking about the history of why salt was demonized originally. Because it wasn't always the villain. For most of human history, it actually was a little bit of a hero. There were entire trade routes dedicated just to salt. There were wars fought over salt. The word salary actually comes from the Latin word salt because Romans used to actually make payments in salt. So how did we go from it being treasured to basically being treated like poison and something that we should be limiting at all costs? Well, in the 1970s, researchers actually started to notice a connection between salt consumption, sodium consumption, and an increase in blood pressure. Early studies showed that when certain groups of people reduced their salt consumption, their blood pressure came down as well. So basically the thinking was if you eat less salt, your blood pressure is going to come down, and that automatically makes you healthy. But does it? The main problem with these studies was that a lot of them were short term, and they only showed this reduction in blood pressure in certain groups. None of them actually looked at the long-term impact that reducing sodium had. And they also targeted salt as the bad guy. They didn't look at the rest of the diet. And this is the reason why it is so hard to do research involving nutrition, because you can't really do any long-term controlled studies. You can't get people to eat exclusively whatever food you're trying to study for a long period of time. First off, it's hard to keep them in a controlled environment. And yeah, because it's ethically wrong to completely control them and control what they're consuming, there's always going to be a little bit of variance. People are never going to stick to the diet plan 100%. It's hard enough to get them to stick to it short term, let alone long term. But I mean, these people that we're studying, they need to live their lives. And this is why we can have two studies that show completely opposite things. One study will show that eggs are bad for your health, that they raise your cholesterol, and another one will show that they don't have a negative impact. So what we need to do is look at the totality of evidence, put all of these studies together, and draw conclusions from the overall result. And even still, this isn't perfect. But my point is the demonization of salt came from a few short-term studies, at least when it comes to raising blood pressure. And the reason that it stuck is because when things are simple like this, when instructions are simple like this, eat less salt and you're going to be healthy, it's easier for people to understand and to follow. When you start introducing big diet changes for people and telling people they need to eat in a certain way and make all these changes and cut all of these things out, people are less likely to do it. But when it's one isolated thing that you more or less can control, it's a little bit easier. And that's one of the reasons why this stuck on for as long as it did. But it's really important to understand the acute impacts of salt or the immediate impacts versus the long-term ones. Because yes, when you eat salt, your blood pressure does go up acutely. And this is a normal response by your body. It's not actually a bad thing. Another example of this happening is when you exercise, your blood pressure goes up. But we all know that that's not a bad thing. It's happening in isolation. It's when your blood pressure stays elevated for long periods of time, aka hypertension. That's when you're going to start to run into problems. And with exercise, we know that even though in the moment it raises your blood pressure, long term it brings your blood pressure down. So what I'm getting at here is that it's not black and white. Just because something happens acutely doesn't mean the same thing is happening long term. Dr. James DiNicolantonio, a cardiovascular research scientist and the author of The Salt Fix, explains that sodium works in a similar way. Over time, your body adjusts to your sodium intake. For most healthy individuals, higher sodium intake doesn't cause chronic high blood pressure. He also points out that low sodium intake can actually increase hormones that raise your blood pressure long term. Hormones like renin and adrenaline. So the relationship between salt and blood pressure isn't always going to be less salt, lower blood pressure. There's more nuance to it. Okay, let's strip away the controversy for a second and focus on biology. Like I said at the start of this episode, sodium is actually an essential electrolyte, similar to magnesium, potassium, calcium. These all fall under the same category. Electrolytes are literally needed to keep you alive, to keep your body working. Your muscles contract because of sodium. Your nerves send signals because of sodium. Your body wouldn't be able to maintain proper fluid balance without sodium. Now, I'm sure we've all experienced the signs and symptoms of low sodium intake. You can get dizzy, you can get headaches, fatigue, muscle cramps. We're more likely to experience these things if it's hot outside, if we're sweating a lot, or if we're exercising. Because when we're doing these things, if we're sweating, we're losing fluid, but we're also losing electrolytes in that fluid. In extreme cases, low sodium can actually lead to seizures and even death. I'm telling you, it really is an important nutrient. Now, here's where things get a little bit more tricky, because for someone who is eating the standard American diet with a lot of processed food, they're eating just a lot of packaged things, can be fast food, but even just anything that's packaged, ready-made meals, frozen dinners, that sort of thing, these foods are loaded with sodium. So the average person who is eating the average diet doesn't really have to worry that they're not consuming enough sodium. For the average American, 70 to 80% of sodium intake comes from processed food. And that's why for people who are eating this way, if they do focus on lowering their sodium intake, this can mean they just are eating less processed food. And so when they see their hypertension improve, when they see their blood pressure come down, it's not so much to do with the lower sodium intake, but rather that they're just eating less processed food. And that's another reason why nutrition is so hard to study, because there are so many factors, so many different foods that are involved. And it's hard to pinpoint exactly which one is the cause of which symptom. Now, I know a lot of you listening to my podcast, a lot of people in my community are not eating the standard American diet. They have cut down significantly on processed food. They're eating mainly whole food. They're focusing their meals around protein. They are eating lots of healthy fat. Maybe they're reducing their carbohydrates, or at the very least being smart about them for better blood sugar control. And for this group of people, because they're not consuming a lot of processed food or any processed food, they're probably not getting a lot of sodium, because whole foods, and especially modern day whole foods, don't have a lot. And that's partly to do with the fact that our soil nowadays is depleted of nutrients. So the food, the fruits and vegetables that we grow in it has less nutrients as a result. And one of the nutrients it's lower in, sodium, magnesium, that sort of thing. Now, if you are one of the people who has reduced their carbohydrate intake, this actually increases your risk of not consuming enough sodium. Because when you reduce carbs in your diet, your body retains less water, and with less water, that also means fewer electrolytes. So it's really important to supplement them. And if you add exercise, sauna use, hot weather into the mix, then your sodium need increases even more. And this is why it is so important that we are replenishing our electrolytes. Now, I know I'm going to get the question, how much salt, how much sodium should we be consuming? Can you consume too much? What are the risks? Now, sodium is a nutrient that if you do consume too much, your body has mechanisms in place to excrete it, and it can excrete it pretty easily. So if you consume more sodium than your body needs, your body excretes it through your urine. With things like potassium, which is another electrolyte, your body can't excrete it as easily. And that's why I don't really recommend supplementing with a electrolyte supplement that's higher in potassium, because we can get quite a bit of potassium in through our food. Avocados, salmon, excellent sources. And because we can pretty easily meet our potassium needs through food, we shouldn't really be supplementing it unless we're doing an extended fast. Zeus. I was like, what is he doing? Okay, you're gonna attack my plan? That's fine. Are you trying to steal the show? Okay. Where was I? Oh, completely lost my train of thought. Oh, so potassium is one that you really only want to supplement in large doses, like I said, if you're doing an extended fast. But with sodium, because we're not getting a lot of it through our food, and because if we're not eating a lot of processed food, if we're eating fewer carbohydrates, if we're exercising, if we live in a hot climate, we need more sodium. It's really important to replenish it through an electrolyte supplement. Now, you can also just use salt to salt your food to taste, but even still, it can be a little bit difficult to get enough in. And that's why I personally use and recommend Sody's Everyday Hydration Salts. They are an electrolyte company, and their product has no added sugar, no artificial sweeteners, no weird stuff in it. They are high in sodium. They have 1,000 milligrams per serve, which is a good thing. Because if you're someone who is just drinking plain water all day, this can actually deplete, or I guess throw your electrolyte balance off. Because if you're consuming more water without replenishing your electrolytes, then your ratio of fluid to electrolytes gets thrown off, like I said. But if you drink your water with electrolytes, then you keep this balance in check. And I really like Sody because their formula has the right ratio of potassium, magnesium, and sodium that is ideal for everyday use. Like I said, it does have a bit of potassium, but not too much because you will be getting a lot through food if you're using it for everyday use. If you want to check them out, you can head to healthcoachkate.com/Sody electrolytes. I will put that link in the description box down below. And make sure to use code HCK15 at checkout because that's going to save you 15% off your order. All right, another question that I know I'm going to be asked is, what about the different types of salt? Because it can be a little bit confusing. A lot of people get caught up in which one is best. So table salt, this is a refined version of salt. A lot of times it also has an anti-caking agent added to it, which, I mean, debatable whether that's a problem or not. Probably not the worst thing in the world, but just something to consider. Sea salt is great because it is minimally processed. It still contains a lot of trace minerals. Same goes for Himalayan pink salt. It actually contains a little bit more magnesium and calcium and less sodium. But I mean, we're talking in such small amounts that it really isn't that big a difference. So honestly, at the end of the day, a good quality sea salt, a good quality pink Himalayan salt, both can be good. But the mineral differences really are minor. So it's not worth getting caught up in which one's best. Now, I will say that there is a small group of people who are salt sensitive. And for these people, they do experience a sharp rise in their blood sugar when they consume excess sodium. And this can be due to genetics, this can be due to kidney disease. There are a few different causes of it. So if you're in that group, then you do need to be a little bit more mindful of your salt consumption. But I think that's only something like 5% of the population. So most people do not fall into this category. Work with your healthcare provider and figure out what salt intake works best for you. All right, so in summary, if you're eating a mostly whole food diet, here are some tips on how to make salt and sodium work for you and not against you. The first one is to salt your food to taste. Your cravings are often a good indicator of your sodium need. The second is to spread your intake throughout the day so you can make sure your sodium levels are replenished at all times. During heat waves, intense training, or if you're eating lower carb that day, make sure to increase your salt intake. If you're only using salt and you're still experiencing the side effects of low sodium, such as headaches, fatigue, dizziness, then try introducing an electrolyte supplement like Sody. So should you be eating more or less salt? Well, if you're eating a lot of processed food in your diet, then yeah, it is probably something you should look at reducing. But if you're eating a mainly whole food diet, if you've reduced your carbohydrates, then you probably need more salt. Low sodium is actually a big part of why people experience keto flu symptoms when they first switch to a low carb diet. These symptoms aren't actually coming from a reduction in carbohydrates. They're coming from your electrolyte levels dropping because you're eating less processed food, you're eating less sodium, your body is retaining less water, it's retaining less sodium, so you experience these symptoms. So if you're someone who has just recently switched to a whole food, low carb diet and you're wondering why you don't feel great, electrolytes could be the key. and sodium specifically. But anyways, guys, I'm gonna wrap up this episode here. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're on Spotify, make sure to follow my podcast over there. It's called Healthy Not Complicated. And if you want to give me a 5-star review on Spotify, or if you want to give me any review, I'm not gonna force you to give me a 5-star, but hopefully if you've made it to the end of this episode, you did enjoy it. I would really appreciate you going over there and rating the podcast. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.